What's going on, guys? It is Kevin Andres, owner of K Squared Fitness, head coach of all the program that's inside there. Today we're breaking down how to optimize aerobic capacity for CrossFit athletes. And this applies to anyone. CrossFit is very broad, but although I'm not affiliated with CrossFit, I've been competing in the sport for the past 10 years and have done tons of experiments and taken athletes through programming. So today we're going to be breaking that down and talk about several different things, understanding what it looks like, how to assess it, different training methodologies, how to integrate it into your programming, nutrition and optimal performance, some mental strategies, common mistakes. Those are the topics that I'm going to be covering. And the first thing I want to talk about is, why is having a good aerobic base or an aerobic capacity important? Essentially, it's going to help you go longer in your harder workouts. So if we are doing a workout, both you and I together, and it's a 15-minute AMRAP, you know how many times people go out hot and they're ahead in the first couple rounds and then they crash and burn because their heart rate has gotten too high, their blood lactate levels are now all into their muscles, are just totally gassed, and my heart rate is lower and I'm able to keep going. Essentially, that's just because you have more aerobic muscular endurance, and the longer you can keep your heart rate down, the more delayed the process of bonking is going to take place. So today we're going to talk about strategies of how to keep your heart rate lower for longer, so that you can go harder in not only longer workouts, but workouts that require going really, really fast, delaying the process of having your heart rate go too high. And we'll talk about zone 2 training and how that can benefit you, and also how to mix in intervals and stuff like that. And I just want to share a little bit of my personal experience. I came from basketball growing up, is what I did. I played high school, college, and professionally in the ABA. And after that, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I started getting into triathlons, but I got too skinny. So then I found CrossFit, thankfully. But I came into the sport of CrossFit with massive endurance background from both the military and from triathlons. And I was running, repeat 5-minute miles and could go for a really long time and had great endurance and a strong VO2 max, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But what I didn't realize was how weak I was relative to the CrossFit world. So although I had this great aerobic base, the second I touched a barbell, I either couldn't do it because I wasn't strong enough to be able to lift it, or the load of the weight of the bar skyrocketed my heart rate because of the amount of power output that it took. So that's what I love about CrossFit. Now I'm much more well-rounded. I'm strong, I'm fit, and I've had to really struggle, or I've had to really work hard at finding that good balance and what it takes to be a well-rounded athlete in all the things: gymnastics, Olympic lifting, endurance, and try not to have too many holes in your fitness. But I will say that having a strong aerobic base is going to help you perform the work, because if you don't have the base, you're going to be continuously coming up short, whether it's in a conditioning workout or just having the lack of muscular endurance or strength to perform a set of skills. So I'm going to be sharing the knowledge from the things that I've learned to you guys. So first little outline I've got here is talking about defining aerobic capacity and its significance in the endurance-based activities. So when we talk about aerobic capacity, as it's defined here in my book as I was reading up on, aerobic exercise requires the body to take oxygen from the atmosphere, deliver it to your lungs, transfer it to your blood, and then pumping to the working muscles where it's utilized for oxidized carbohydrates and fats in order to produce ATP. So what the heck does that mean? When we're breathing in oxygen and we're getting rid of CO2, we want as much oxygen as possible to be going to our muscles, because the better we can deliver oxygen to our muscles, the better your heart rate is going to be and the longer you're going to be able to go. It's once you start running out of oxygen in an anaerobic state, that's when things get to be your muscles are too tired. There's too much bad blood in the triathlon world, we say, in your muscles, and that jacks up your heart rate, and then you get into an anaerobic state, which is lack of oxygen, and that's when your heart rate is much higher and much harder to sustain. Let's give you some examples here. So an example of an aerobic output might be if I said to run, in the CrossFit world, we're like, well, everything can be hard, but an aerobic sustained effort would be if we ran for, if I just put it out there, like 60 minutes. All right, well, 60 minutes, you can't just go floorboard. You can't run fast the whole time. Now, there's certain training zones where we can stay below to be at an aerobic state. We'll talk about that a little bit, but you get the idea. If we're going to run for 60 minutes, you're going to need some good endurance. Now, if we were to do something like a Fran workout, 21-15-9 of thrusters and pull-ups, that is designed to be just total floorboard. So that's the complete opposite. Run for 60 minutes, Fran, anaerobic, go wide open. Now, when we get into studying the differences, if I run at 60 minutes and my heart rate is at 175 the whole time versus 155 the whole time, who's fitter? It's the person who can run at the same, if we both ran 6 miles, you ran it 6 miles at 175 and I ran 6 miles at a 155, we finished at the same time. I, in this particular example, am more fit because I had a lower heart rate. Now the goal is for everyone to have a lower heart rate of training, but be able to put out the same amount of power output. So what are some different ways that you can assess your current aerobic capacity? Some popular tests is what I just mentioned. Although I said for 60 minutes, you could do a 30-minute run and see what you can accomplish. See what your distance achieved was, and also what your heart rate was throughout that entire thing. I personally use a Garmin watch and a Garmin Pro strap, chest strap, to keep track of, am I staying in my heart rate zones? Am I staying in aerobic state or an anaerobic state? And that's a simple test that you could do. The quite opposite of that is you could do a 2K row. A 2K row is obviously going to challenge you to, probably anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes, depending on your fitness level. And that is where we're really trying to challenge yourself and push the pace and probably get into some anaerobic work because you're on that higher end of the spectrum of training there. So those are a couple of benchmark workouts that you can do. And another one that's common as Zone 2 is getting more and more popular in the sport of CrossFit, which is great because it's all about building your aerobic base. There's a popular training method called the Maftone method, but what's important is to be able to establish some type of baseline and then something that you can come back and look at after 4 to 6 weeks of your training. And that's actually what we do in our program at K-Squared Fitness. We've got a daily conditioning workout that's designed to improve your engine, running, rowing, biking, ski erg, swim. We take you through long workouts, we take you through interval workouts, and that's actually what we're going to be diving into next, is training methods to improve your aerobic capacity. So in the sport of CrossFit and also just the triathlon side of the world, they often encourage us to have, they say 80-20. 80% of your training should be aerobic, 20% should be high intensity. I'm more of like a 70-30 guy at this point. And what that means is that, 70% of your training should probably be in a lower, more controlled, steady state as opposed to wide open. Now there's 5 different heart rate training zones. Zone 1, warm up. Zone 2, kind of easy pace, easy run. Zone 3, we call this no man's land because you're working too hard for the benefits of probably burning fat and staying aerobic, but you're not working hard enough to get actual physical adaptation and stress on the muscles, as opposed to Zone 4. Now you're getting into a more anaerobic state. In Zone 5, you're just total power output. So those are the different training zones, and a good training program is going to have the majority of your stuff working at that lower intensity stuff when we're talking about conditioning. And then some of your training is going to be really hard intervals. An example would be, 2-to-1 work to rest ratio. So if I'm going for 2 minutes of work, I can push the pace, but if I got 60 seconds of rest, it's just enough rest to where I can go hard again, as opposed if it was a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. 2 minutes of work, 2 minutes of rest, that's a lot of recovery, and that's going to dictate what your heart rate can do. And to give you some insight on what a training week looks like as far as improving your aerobic capacity, one day would kind of be like a steady state run, anywhere from depending on where you're at with your fitness level, 30 to 45 minutes. Day 2 would be some type of interval training where we're training speed and we're training short intervals and trying to get power output. And then another day could be kind of tempo work to where you're working really hard, you're getting a little bit of rest, working really hard again, and just having that different variation of training. Let's talk about how to integrate aerobic workouts into CrossFit programming. And this is one thing that I get asked all the time too, is if I'm doing all this cardio, is this going to make me weaker as far as my strength training? And I've done a ton of tests. There's some popular fitness guys out there that have done this as well. That's not the case. It actually is going to promote your strength because you're able to flush out the bad blood that we have in our muscles. It's in aerobic training should be a recovery state. It's getting you to flush out, to breathe oxygen better, to get more oxygen to your muscles, and it's more of a recovery purpose. So now if you're getting up to where you're doing too much volume, of course that's going to be a different example, and we'll talk about some of the common mistakes of whenever you're trying to accomplish this here in a little bit. But when you're trying to start plugging in some aerobic workouts into your programming, I'm going to use today for example. We are on a deload week of our K-Squared Fitness competitor program. We've got multiple different programs within our training system, but we're in a deload week. So that meant on week 1 we tested. On week 2 through 6 we were progressing, increasing percentages, 5% increase in back squat, 5% going up, whatever the skill that we tested throughout the past 7 weeks. But today we brought everything back down. We're resetting the body and we're trying to get the body to be able to recover, so next week we can test and we can have better improved numbers. And we built up to, I think 85% was our last week, 5 sets of 5 back squats, and then today for example was 5 sets of 5 at 60%. So pulled the strength numbers way back, and then this entire week we're going to be working on flushing out, getting some aerobic work. So today's conditioning piece was 5 rounds, 400 meter run, 16 handstand push-ups, 400 meter run, 8 handstand push-ups, and that took about 30 minutes. It was a great way to get a good flush in the legs, get a good muscular endurance pump in the arms. We've got scaling options in there so you can get the appropriate stimulus, but the entire week is going to be this longer work to kind of get the body into that aerobic state so we can work on recovery there. Another thing that I get asked often is if I'm just doing this slow, steady state training of zone 2. First off, what does zone 2 look like? The Maffetone method is 180 beats, or 180 minus your age. So I'm 33, I think, so I'd be, call it 147. And then there's a couple of different metrics in there. If you're sick, you can drop your heart rate a little bit, or if you're pretty fit, you can increase it a little bit. But basically, 180 minus your age gives you your zone 2 training protocol, and that's what you would run at your heart rate for steady state. Now, I'm a firm believer in that if you just run at steady state training, the idea is to improve your aerobic capacity, right? But if we don't incorporate speed training in, you will not be fast. And here's my take on it. The aerobic work, the longer, slower runs are going to give you the capacity to be able to perform the speed work. So if I'm running, let's say 2 to 3 times a week, 45 minutes, zone 2 training. This is a very moderate pace. Just for an example, when you first start this, you might be running at 10 minutes per mile at 150 beats per minute. You're having to slow way back because as a CrossFit athlete, you're used to working really hard and sustaining that. But if we pull you back and we bring you down to 150 and we run at those 10-minute miles, well, as you get more fit, that number is going to come down. Let's say in a month from now, you're running a 45-minute run, you're now running a 9-minute mile at a lower heart rate of 150. So you can see you went from 10 minutes a mile to 9 minutes per mile. You're getting more fit. Now this is important because as you get fitter, your delayed process when you're doing your speed work, it'll take your heart rate longer to climb up. So if we're doing 400-meter runs and you're doing repeats, previously you might have been totally zapped after 2 intervals and you're totally trashed. Well, the bigger your aerobic base is, the bigger you can sustain longer efforts. When you come over to the speed work, you'll be able to have a lower heart rate, and you'll be able to recover quicker so you can get more output on that speed work. And this is why having a proper program is so important, because most people skip that component of training in itself and taking the time to build the base. Or whether we're talking about cardio or strength, people just want to go straight to going fast and getting the one rep max. Now, this video isn't about strength training. Now, the same thing applies in strength training. Is we have to build up your muscular endurance, and starting off with 15 to 20 reps, then bring it down to 10 to 12 reps, then 5 to 8 reps. So if you're patient in this process, you want to be in this for the long haul, build your muscular endurance, build your aerobic capacity, focus on technique, strength, and the foundations, and you'll be set up for success. Most people don't understand the art of programming as opposed to just getting great workouts. But if you're struggling and you're plateauing and you're not able to improve the way you want, might have to unpeel the curtains, build the base, master the foundations. Those are some things I would encourage you. And when we're talking about nutrition and recovery for optimal athletic performance, there's a couple of things that factor based off when you're training. So, a larger aerobic base, meaning, you know what it means now, is going to pull fat for storage. So as you're running, as you're exercising, if you can delay that process before getting into that anaerobic state, your body is primarily using fat as fuel. Now, that's why I highly encourage people whenever they're training to go slower in their workouts and build or have negative splits, get faster as you go. Because if you're starting with your workout and your heart rate goes like this, boop, and it's going to have a hard time coming down, you're zapping almost all your glycogen because you're going straight to a carb burning source. Now, if you can start off a little bit slower and have your heart rate gradually build from being fit and being strategic mentally, you will burn fat as fuel for longer and then get into carbohydrates later on. So some of the things that you can do, like if you train in the morning, for instance, when I'm training in the morning, I don't have time to eat, so I'll drink carbohydrates and couple that with branched chain amino acids, and then also some electrolytes so that I'm getting enough sodium and replenishing all the sweat that I'm pouring out. Hydration is key to optimal performance. When we talk about training later in the day and maybe your afternoon workout, it's best to eat probably 2 hours before, and you also want to prioritize lean protein, carbohydrate, things like white rice, potatoes, low fiber cereals are a good choice, and it's the time where you want to minimize fats. Now, if you have a 2 hour window before you're training, great. If you're less than like an hour, then you want to have something like a smoothie where it's easily digestible, you're getting carbs, proteins, you're getting, it's a banana, strawberries, getting some sugars in there, and that's what you want to have if you're pressed for time. And then after your workout, that's when it's okay to have a little bit more carbohydrates, even more. In the endurance world, it was 4 carbohydrates to 1 protein. So that'd be 100 carbs, 25 grams protein. But for CrossFit athletes, generally something like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 is good for most people. And this is an opportunity for you could have some type of liquid protein right after your workout, or you could have a smoothie, and probably a couple hours after is when you can start to begin to have a little bit more fat. I just want to share with you some mental strategies as well when we're talking about these longer workouts to build your aerobic capacity. You got to find something that's going to help you keep going, because a little bit of a mind game when you're going slow. So something I do is sometimes I'll just listen to no music and just enjoy the scenery. And I know that sounds silly, but just embracing what you have around you. I'll play little games in my head about my breathing count. We haven't even talked about nasal breathing and the benefits of that, but just a quick little nugget. When we're working on trying to build your aerobic capacity and doing that zone 2 work, it's a great opportunity to breathe primarily through your nose. It's exceptional for you, and the cliff notes are, if you can breathe through your belly, which is done from breathing through your nose, you will have a better time breathing through your diaphragm, as opposed to breathing from your mouth is going to make you breathe from your chest. And when your chest gets tight, your respiratory muscles get tight, your scalenes, your neck, all this gets super tight, and your breathing will be altered. If you can breathe through your nose and deep down in your belly, your breathing won't be as alter. There's a ton of different stuff about, you know, increasing your CO2 tolerance and also helping you stay in a parasympathetic state. I do want to talk about that for just a second. Not all workouts, as we've talked about, needs to be super, super high intensity, you know. And the same thing, if we're doing a zone 2 run or a lower steady state run, we don't want a low intensity run to feel like in our body as a fight or flight mode. And you know, your body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, and emotional stress. So if we're doing a low intensity run, but you're mouth breathing and you're working really hard and you're overstressing your body doesn't know the difference. So we got to be able to dictate what a parasympathetic response or workout should look like. So nasal breathing often acts as a governor to hold you back and to pull you down and to make you go slower, because you can't go as fast when you're breathing through your nose. So that's one thing that I do on my endurance workouts. And also I'll just play little games in my head where I'll count up to 10 and back down to 1, count up to 15, back down to 1, just finding little things to keep my breathing pattern in cadence. Any things that you can think of, let me know as well for, you know, mental strategies. Obviously positive self-talk. Hey, you know, I can do this. I'm improving my aerobic capacity by me working on my endurance. I'm going to be able to go longer in my strength workouts or my power output workouts, and you know, use those things as fuel, because I think it all goes back to what your goals are. And if your training is aligned with what you're trying to accomplish, then there's some fuel for you, and just use this as an opportunity to have some positive self-talk that this is going to help you work towards your goal, which is why it's so important to have a coach working with you and supporting you, because he can help steer you on what is best for you. And that's one thing that we love to do with our athletes as well. If you need some support, you're trying to accomplish something, help point you in the different direction. Last thing I want to talk about is some common mistakes with aerobic training. Too much volume too soon. You find out that you want to get better at aerobic capacity and you say, I'm going to run 3 to 5 miles every single day. Well, you're going to find a way that either injury or just total burnout. And you want to have something that is sustainable. We talk about that all the time. Being able to have something that is a small change that's going to get you in the right direction with the least path of resistance. So if you want to incorporate something like this, we've got, as I mentioned in our K2 engine program, we've got a daily 20 to 35 minute conditioning workout that is programmed to not overload you in volume, but also to give you enough training stimulus to improve your performance. That's an option for you. If you're not a K-squared athlete yet, you can check out the description below to get plugged into the program. And if you're doing this on your own, then it's about making small, minor steps. You might start off with 2 to 3 days a week and make it 30 minutes. I would actually encourage you your first month to probably just work on building your aerobic capacity with the zone 2 work yet. You probably do enough speed work. You're not going to get slower by not doing your speed work in 1 month. I would say the first month, just see what happens if you go for 2 to 3 runs, 30 minutes, slow pace. Use that method I talked about, 180 minus your age, and see what it looks like. At what intensity can you hold your heart rate for 30 minutes, and how far can you go? A month from now, retest that and see how it looks. So easy, but in the CrossFit world, it's often neglected. You got to listen to your body. You know, there's a difference in, I'm a huge believer in your mind being, you know, taking action and base things off action, not emotion. But if you're feeling run down, sometimes you just got to take it a little bit easier. You know, it's still okay to get outside and go for a walk, but you might not need to go for a super intense run. You know, sometimes where I'm going to go for a zone 2 run, I might have had 45 minutes planned, but Lee, I'm supposed to be at 8 minutes per mile for my zone 2 and I'm running at a 9:30. That's my body communicating to me that if I'm supposed to be at 8.5 minute mile at a 150 heart rate, but I'm running a 10-minute mile at a 150 heart rate today, my body's stressed out and it's not handling it well. And sometimes, you know, more is not always better. So nothing wrong with listening to your body, making some subtle changes, maybe getting in the pool so you can have some less impact on the body, hopping on the bike. You know, there's different forms of training where concentric training versus eccentric training is more demanding on the body. Not going to dive into that too much, but an example of biking is just concentric motion. You're not going to get as fatigued on a bike muscularly because you're just pushing. Now, running, when we're running, we have to absorb all the contact. So that's eccentric is when you're absorbing something, and concentric is when you're actually, pushing off the ground. So too much of eccentric muscular tissue damage will cause the body to be too stressed and need a break. So oftentimes when I'm feeling that way, I'll get in the pool because that is primarily concentric and it's low impact and it's a great way to get cardio. I think that is going to wrap it up for everything that we've talked about for how to improve your aerobic capacity. If you have any additional questions, put them down in the comments below. Would love to work on more type of content like this to help you guys out. As we talked about, find something that works for you. Start off with subtle changes, something that you can test and then retest after 30 days, keeping a lot of your training much slower than you think to be in that more aerobic state, and it'll make it to where keep the easy days easy and the hard days freaking go for it. Make the hard days hard, make the easy days easy, and that's going to help you improve your aerobic capacity. If you guys want to check out our engine program to help you improve your aerobic capacity, check out the description down below. Hope to see you on the other side.